Imagine your family members being taken. You have no idea where they are until you get the call. Hi, I'm Isabella, and today I'm going to be introducing you to the national issue that is so rarely talked about, which is the thousands of missing and murdered Indigenous women. I myself am a Native American woman who has lost multiple family members due to this issue and the lack of awareness of this issue, which is why I'm so passionate to inform you about this topic today. Now I'm going to start off with a few statistics. There are over 5,700 missing and murdered Indigenous women. Indigenous women are 12 times more likely to go missing and be murdered than the average woman. Murder is the third leading cause in Indigenous women for death. Usually a missing and murdered Indigenous woman victim is under the age of 35, and the most dangerous ages to be where people are taken as 10 to 24. Now I'm going to move on to the racism Indigenous women face. Indigenous women are not often taken seriously by law enforcement. Missing, murdered, and Indigenous women cases are not furtherly looked into as they should be. Indigenous women also face more abuse. Over 94% of Indigenous women are raped or sexually assaulted. Cases where white men abuse Indigenous women are not fairly prosecuted and often just get a slap on the wrist. Now I'm going to talk about why this needs more coverage. The majority of people have no idea this issue is going on. There's barely any media coverage on it, and there needs to be more coverage. People are literally dying. Most of the coverage is coming from Indigenous people, which forms kind of like a cycle where the fact that the media and law enforcement does not take Indigenous women's thoughts into consideration as much as they should. This issue definitely needs more coverage. There were more coverage, but if there were more coverage, there wouldn't be as many dead women, and they wouldn't go missing as much, and the people that have abused them would get they would get prosecuted the way they should, and the families would get justice. Similar to the Black Lives Matter movement, the issue has been repressed for so long, and the missing and murdered Indigenous women issue would greatly benefit by the same coverage that the Black Lives Matter movement has had and deserves. Now I'm going to talk about the effects this issue has had. This issue greatly affects the families and the communities that the women come from. I have been to multiple protests, and I've heard the stories and the sadness that this issue has brought to people. Almost all Native American communities have experienced the effects of the missing and murdered Indigenous women issue. Quite recently, the Ho-Chunk community has experienced the effects of this issue. A woman by the name of Cozy Decora was killed by her fiance. A month before, she hit 3 months sobriety, and she wanted a better life for her and her child. So she was gonna finally leave her abusive fiance. But before she could, her abuser killed her. He then put her in an outhouse and set her on fire and took their child and went to a cabin and tried to hide out. But he was eventually found and given a trial, but was only sentenced to 15 years for killing an innocent Indigenous woman. This affected the Cozy family of Cozy and their community in a terrible way. They protested for his sentence to be longer, but nothing changed. This is one of the stories of the many that are so traumatic and have changed the families and communities that these women have came from for forever. This issue has also personally affected myself, my family, and my community. Multiple women in my family have been victims of this issue. My first cousin's daughter, Tess White, was tortured and killed. In 2015, Tess was 25 and 10 weeks pregnant, and she was abducted in Milwaukee. She was killed, burned, and found in a field in South Dakota 3 weeks later. Luckily, her killers were sentenced to life without parole. Another loss my family and the community has experienced was the death of my cousin, Linda Pema. In 2000, Linda was 35 with 4 children, and in 2011, she was taken while attending Indian Summers in Milwaukee. The next day, she was found dead. Her killer has never been found. My family and community has been affected by these losses for such a long time because this issue is rarely talked about, and some killers, like Linda's, have never been charged or found. These women often left children behind, and these children had to live without their moms. These women will always be missed, and their stories will forever motivate their communities and families for fighting for justice for them and the attention and coverage that the missing and murdered Indigenous women issue deserves. My community has campaigns and events to spread awareness. We wear red and red handprints on our face and hang red dresses in the trees to spread awareness. The Potawatomi tribe has recently put a lot of effort into spreading awareness about the missing and murdered Indigenous women issue. The Ho-Chunk community has also put a lot of effort into this issue as well. The Potawatomis have put up billboards and to speak out about missing and murdered Indigenous women, and the Ho-Chunks have held fundraisers and many protests. Overall, Indigenous women face many dangers and experience fear each day for their lives. There are thousands of missing and murdered Indigenous women that are not getting the attention and coverage they deserve. This issue needs more coverage so that there are not as many stolen sisters. Now that we have covered this issue and why it is so important, I hope this speech made you more aware of the national issue and the killing of Indigenous women and why it needs more coverage as much as any movement such as the Black Lives Matter movement. And I hope this speech helped you to realize that this issue is going on and it actually really needs help from other people. Thank you.